Do you know what the charm of small and old towns is? In their unique architecture, which gives an almost homely coziness to the streets, squares, and courtyards. It is in such a small town that the heroine of our story lives. Her father is a big businessman by local standards and has several enterprises for grain processing. He also invests in the construction of housing. But his main brainchild is a sugar factory. Having such a big and strong business, he did not turn into a soulless owner but remained the same cheerful, kind, and decent man. Employees of all his firms and enterprises called him simply Steve, thereby expressing their boundless loyalty and love for the boss. Steve's wife, unable to withstand the test, fell on her wealth, giving birth to a daughter, immediately had an affair on the side and filed for divorce, suing for divorce a good chunk of his business. The child she decided to leave the father, as from the birth of her daughter, did not feel maternal feelings for her, rather the opposite. The child irritated her. The first time after the divorce, she still occasionally visited the baby, then only occasionally called, and after a couple of years completely forgot about her existence, leaving with another suitor to live in Europe. Steve, on the contrary, the soul in his daughter did not dote on, pampered, hiring her the best nannies and governesses. Rose, which is the name of our heroine, Steve's daughter, grew up mobile and very smart child. At age 5, she learned to read and told his father that the school will not go to school, and will help his father in business, because she can already read and sign printed letters of different papers. Steve laughed then, but did not take the little girl into the business. "Daddy, I have something very important to tell you," Rose said to her father one evening when he sat down to dinner in the large, bright living room, tired after work. "Come on, spit it out. Did you fail any exam again or painted the car of an English woman? Why am I called to the dean's office?" Steve asked his daughter with a smile, smearing on his plate the hated vegetable mashed potatoes, which he hated, but ate because he was very afraid of getting fat. Steve had joint problems, and with all his hard work, you can't get sick. "Daddy, I only failed one exam my freshman year, and the English girl doesn't drive anymore. They took away her license for 2 lanes, so she's even meaner and nastier now. But I don't care, I have 2 more exams and I'm a graduate in finance. That's not what I wanted to talk to you about." "Daddy, I think I'm in love," Rose confessed to her father and hugged him from behind. "Finally! God, how I need another man in the house and business. At least he is not stupid." Laughing, asked his daughter father, putting away the dish with hateful vegetables. "Daddy, he's the best. He is the smartest, the most handsome, the kindest, and the funniest. And he adores me. And it's not because I have money, it's because I have money. But he's not rich. His mother raised him alone, without a father. He really wants to meet you and become friends. Let's invite him to visit tomorrow and you'll see how cool he is," suggested the girl and kissed her father on the nose. "Good. Call your boyfriend for dinner tomorrow. We'll see what kind of queen you've got. What's his name anyway? Carl? You know, like my grandfather. He was a good grandfather. God rest his soul." That was the deal. Carl was very nervous about meeting his potential father-in-law. Long ironed his jacket and pants, polished the only shoes and tried on a tie, rented from a neighbor in the dorm room. "Rose, I'm so worried. What if your father doesn't like me? I don't have any money. I don't even have a father. If he gives me a turn, I'll fall through the ground or go crazy." Hysterical new groom, for the 5th time smoothing the hairbrush on the temple naughty curl. "Carl, my father, although a businessman, but a very simple and intelligent man. And in general, his main thing is his daughter's happiness, not your money. He's got plenty of money of his own to count. His favorite grandfather was named Carl, and his father has his own theory. If you're the same name as his grandfather, he'll love you like his own. It's silly, of course, but if it makes him feel better, I'm glad." She grinned, and took the comb away from Carl until he'd combed out all the hair on his head. Rose and Carl studied at the last year of university, which was located in the regional center, literally 40 minutes away by train. Only Carl was a technician, and Rose studied economics and finance. Her father provided his beloved daughter with a car and a personal driver while she was taking her driver's license, but Rose preferred the train to a private car. Morning traffic jams were exhausting, and Rose was sometimes late for her classes. Carl lived in the city, on campus, in a dormitory. They had met at a student party in their 4th year, but they were just friends and there was no talk of high feelings. Rose had been raised in the tradition of chastity and did not have several affairs a year, as many of her classmates and girlfriends. Oh, Rose, with your looks and money you could have a lot of admirers who would kiss the sidewalk on which you just walked, and you all in Puritans go, resented the chaste behavior of her friend Rose's neighbor in the cottage, windy and crazy girl Lizzie, who in her 23 has already been married and divorced, and had time to divorce, and spun romance left and right. Well, you know, I don't want to be a reflection of my dissolute mother. I want to marry once and for great love. I don't want to be rich. I don't want to be famous. I want to love the man, not his purse. What did you miss about Ethan? He was a great guy. He held you in his arms and blew you away. Every holiday with flowers took you on vacation. So what if he was just an ordinary foreman? But he was a man with a head and made a good living. And your new one? He's a disgusting guy. Slippery, doesn't make eye contact when he talks, as if he's hiding something. Who is he? And his name is slippery and unpleasant. Jonathan. Lizzie, maybe he's just John. And Jonathan calls himself Jonathan to make himself look more impressive? Rose snickered. Oh, come on. He's cute. Do you know how much money he makes? He's got his own software company, a house downtown. Have you seen his car? Yeah. Tidbit. The neighbor countered Rose's argument. Are you sure it's all his? He doesn't seem like a prosperous man. He's more like a boorish, uptight chatterbox. I don't believe him, and Dad doesn't know any such company, statute, and he knows a lot of entrepreneurs. By the way, Dad doesn't like him either. You, Lizzie, take a look at him. Something's not right here. Carl and Rose arrived a little late for dinner. Steve hated to wait and was never late himself. When the young people appeared on the threshold of a large, good but not flashy rich house, the owner was already a little on edge. Well, how do you explain being 20 minutes late? I gave you a car with an experienced driver, dinner is at 7, and I have a schedule. Steve expressed his displeasure, which put the couple, and especially the house guest, in a very uncomfortable position. Daddy, excuse us. Carl lost his dorm room keys somewhere and we were waiting for his roommate to come back and lock the door. He got nervous. Maybe he just forgot where he put it. Don't be angry. You're not a mean person. My favorite daughter soothed her father, almost fox-like. Carl was close to fainting. He felt hot and cold. He had forgotten his potential father-in-law's name and, extending his hand to greet him, called him Ben instead of Ron on his passport. Hard to remember. The host joked angrily, which upset Carl even more. I'm sorry, I got excited. Carl, he introduced himself. Carl said, still trying to rehabilitate himself in front of his lover's father. All right, don't take offense at me. I'm just starting to get old and become an old, disgruntled grouch. Let's have dinner. Stephanie, our house fairy godmother, cook, and housekeeper in one person, has set such a table for us today that I almost salivated. And now you're late. Steve offered to sit down at the table in a kindly, cheerful way, which calmed down his daughter's fiancé a little. Look at the carp Stephanie has baked. Not a carp, but a work of art. Crusted, browned, with rustic potatoes. Come on, Carl. It's not every day in the dormitory such viands, joked the owner of the house, shoveling a huge piece of fish into his plate right with the head. I don't like fish very much, mumbled Carl, who hated fish of any kind, and especially hated freshwater fish. He always thought it smelled of mud, and the small bones made it unfit to eat. Daddy, don't be so sarcastic. A man doesn't eat fish. Why are you all tense again, like you're about to jump? I told Carl you're an avid fisherman, and you caught that magnificent carp yourself. You're the best daddy I've ever had, and you'll forgive Carl's little whims. There's plenty of meat and salads. You don't give a shit about the carp. I'm going to eat it, and I'm going to give Carl a roast. Carl was already regretting that he had refused the fish, and that he had come to this huge house, and that he had been born. Rose cheered him up as best she could, but his lover wilted and just picked at his salad with his fork, occasionally sipping at the sour table wine. By all standards, the dinner had not gone well. Carl's answers to Steve's questions were either boring or off the mark. An hour later, he went home, recognizing in his heart his complete failure and motivating his departure by his preparation for the last state exam. Even Rose felt uncomfortable in her own home and was a little angry at her father and her fiancé too. Well, I should have lost my keys on this particular day? What a nuisance. I know how Father doesn't like people who are late or don't keep their word. His whole business is built on strictly following his orders and responding to any hesitations or problems in a timely manner. Yes, Dad is a pedant, but that doesn't make him worse, the girl reasoned in her mind. Their whole way of life was built on such simple rules, and Rose was used to them from childhood. Carl left on the 9 o'clock train. Although slightly offended at such an early departure, the landlord offered a car and driver. But Carl left the house almost half an hour before the train, as if he had been scalded with boiling water, and the station was no more than 10 minutes away by quiet steps. You want the truth, daughter? I didn't like your boyfriend. If I were him, I'd better not lock the dorm room, and the first meeting with the father of the bride was not late. You know, he prioritizes the smallest, most insignificant issues over the most important ones. What's stealing from the room of 2 poor students? Maybe his fate is at stake here. You see, he doesn't want the carp. When I met your mother's parents, I drank moonshine and ate zucchini caviar. The 1990s, there was nothing to eat, especially with 3 children. And I understood everything and couldn't insult their hospitality. Even then, I couldn't stand this vegetable mishmash and tried moonshine for the first time. Then I spent half a night with the toilet in my arms. But I survived the lousiness test. By the way, my father-in-law and your grandparents were good people. Rest in peace. Who did they mold their daughter into? I spoiled her. I didn't limit my means. I realized that I was almost 10 years older than her. I wanted to keep her, but it didn't work. That's it. That's it. Don't be sad. It's not for me to live with your Carl, but for you. And if you really love him, I will accept any choice you make. Steve finished his speech and kissed his daughter on the top of her head. You're the best daddy ever. I'm going to call and calm Carl down because he probably can't find a place to be, Rose said with a smile and ran to her room on the 2nd floor. A couple of weeks later, having passed the last state exam at the university and celebrated the graduation, the young people began to think about the wedding and made plans for their future life. The relationship between Steve and Carl had improved. Carl was no longer late and even once ate soup made in a cauldron from roach and minnows caught by the owner of the house. Well, Carl, didn't you poison yourself with the soup? Look how he's eating it, Rose. Look at him, laughed satisfied Steve. In early July, to get acquainted with the bride and her father, came Carl's mother, Wendy, a quiet, modest woman who very much liked the father of the bride. Carl's mother is nice, but she's just unhappy, and Carl seems embarrassed by her. It's not right. You can't shy away from a good mother no matter what social status she has. She works in a bakery as a technician, right? I'll give her a good position in my bakery, and we'll find her a place to live. I've got a small apartment nearby, a service apartment. You'll get married, and a 50-meter apartment with all amenities will be enough for her alone. You give her a hint. I see she's in her own backwater all alone. She's got a son she's raised and educated. Carl and his mother lived in a small village where all the attractions were an oak park, an old factory producing medical instruments, and a bakery, where his mother worked first as a baker and then as a production technologist. Upon graduation, Carl was immediately employed by his future father-in-law at his grain processing company as a lead engineer. Carl did not like the work, but he did not give away his dissatisfaction, realizing that after marrying the daughter of a businessman, he could climb the social ladder much faster and more confident than his university friends. The wedding was scheduled for the end of September, but in August, Steve had a heart attack and it was postponed until the spring or summer of next year. What's the rush? You'll be able to test your feelings again. It's a shame Wendy didn't agree to move. Carl can stay in the servants' quarters for a while. It's not right for him to live with us until we're married. It's a sin. I can't forbid you to meet in the apartment. You're not little. And I'm not a dictator. I understand. I'm young. My hormones are raging. Rose, you hear what I'm saying? Don't pout. You'll realize I was right. Steve was lying in an ordinary hospital room and from there taught everyone about life. His daughter, his deputies, even the housekeeper Stephanie, who took his teachings with a smile because she served in the house for more than 20 years and knew her job from and up. At the beginning of October, when her father recovered from his illness, Rose also went to work in the financial and economic department of her father's sugar factory. She was a clever girl, and her older colleagues could not be pleased with the new employee. With Carl, they met every day after work at his office apartment, and weekends spent at the cottage, 30 kilometers from the town. Steve had bought this house about 5 years ago. Driving by the village one day, he immediately noticed this beautiful and good house with a well-tended garden and front garden, which simply fragranced with different unseen flowers. He stopped the car and just decided to enjoy the beautiful view. It was summer, and the windows of the house were open. From the back of the house could be heard a baby crying and the quiet voice of a woman who, while putting the baby to bed, was singing a lullaby in an edgy voice. Seeing an expensive foreign car stop next to the house, an old man came out of the house to meet Steve. And not that he was very old, just that his once handsome face was so streaked with deep wrinkles that it gave the impression that he was far over 70, but his body was still young, fit, and even beautiful. "What, dear man, are you looking for in our neighborhood? Or maybe someone?" the man asked, lighting a cheap cigarette. "I am admiring your house, how everything here is tastefully done, and the garden and the front garden are well tended. You can see that everything is done with love, not by order. For me, the builders built the house, professionals. The project myself developed and the funds were, but there is no that warmth and love that in your house, even envy. And you buy it from me, if you have money. I'm not asking cheap," sadly but confidently offered the old man, and, having put out the cigarette on his palm, hid the remaining cigarette butt back in the pack. Steve choked. "Grandpa, are you out of your mind to sell a house like this? I hear there's a kid in there with his mother. A kid needs a good place to live." "The child needs a living mother." The old man sharply interrupted him and wiped away a tear. "We are in grief, dear man. Nothing makes us happy except our grandson. He is only 6 months old and he is already half an orphan, and then my daughter has completely withered away. Trouble after trouble. My daughter married a good man, decent and hardworking. We changed the roof in the house and the yard with paving stones and built an annex. Well, it's not the hands of my son-in-law, but gold. He will never say a word against me. My wife and I couldn't get enough of it. The young people lived with us. Why, it's a big, solid house, plenty of room for everyone. My daughter got pregnant and then the first blow came. They found out she had cancer. They said we should have an abortion, or we don't know what will happen to the child. She didn't want to have the baby, but she wouldn't have it. And how can you kill a living child? It's not human. My wife, as soon as she learned about the diagnosis, went sick, and a month later God took her to himself. She couldn't take it, my heart, the blow of such a blow. My son-in-law lost his job while with my daughter in hospitals and doctors in the capital. He left her pregnant for me and went on a shift. A month on shift, 2 weeks at home. He made good money, a golden man. My daughter even got better from the treatment and her tummy grew and the baby seemed healthy. On the third shift, my son-in-law left and disappeared like through the ground. No news, no call. At first I resented him, saying he had abandoned me, he was afraid of responsibility and all the difficulties, but my daughter dissuaded me. But now I don't believe it myself. A man can't just disappear like that. He'd show up somewhere. We filed a police report and sent out ads with photos everywhere. Nothing. My daughter reached her due date and gave birth to a boy. Pretty, like 2 drops of water to my son-in-law. He's so healthy and throaty. And my daughter recovered after the birth, and the cancer seemed to have receded. She was waiting for her husband, crying for him. Only my son saved me from sad thoughts. But a month ago, the disease came back again. The doctor said it had relapsed, for crying out loud. She's lost weight beyond recognition. The damn cancer is eating her up, and there's no money for treatment anymore. Buy a house if you like it. I won't charge a lot. We just want to sell quickly and buy something cheaper. There's no time. My daughter will die. Who will raise the baby? The old man was no longer hiding his tears. He just leaned with both hands on the carved fence and cried quietly. As much as you want. I'll give you the money today. My lawyers will make the sale and purchase on the spot, and you will find something simpler from the housing. Tell me the amount. The deal took place only a week later, though Steve gave the money against a receipt the very next day and did not hurry the tenants to move. He realized how hard it was for them to leave the family nest so quickly. They found a place not far away from their old home, a couple of kilometers away. It was a small house with a small plot of land and an old well inside the yard. When the tenants had moved out, and Steve, already on the owner, examined the house. He realized that everything in the house is so well thought out and organic that there was no point in changing or completing. He himself was rarely at the dacha, but his daughter was just in love with this beautiful place and tried to spend all weekends there. Steve did not tell her about the sad fate of the old tenants and asked the neighbors not to spread about it. Later he learned from the neighbor Lizzie that the old man had treated his daughter, and she managed to raise her son a little. She died when the boy was 5. At first, Steve even wanted to help the old man and the boy, but then he himself had health problems and forgot about his charitable impulses. But every month he put a small amount of money into the old man's bank account, as if from the council to raise the baby. The old man did not go into details. He just withdrew money from the account and tried to survive after so many tragedies. He couldn't give up. He was responsible for his grandson's life. Rose, tell your father I'm tired of being an engineer. There's a wedding the other day. Maybe he'll put me in charge of one of his firms. How long is he going to keep checking up on me? Doesn't he want a son-in-law, not a complete stranger, to be his right-hand man? We'll get everything later anyway. Carl once again expressed his dissatisfaction with his position. I've talked to my father many times. He is now completing some new object and shrugs off any talk. His old team is important to him at this stage. Well, bear with me. The project's due in a month. I'm sure that before the wedding you will already sit in the chair of the director of one of his branches, Rose assured her future husband. God willing. By the way, what do you think about going on a wedding trip to Malta? They say it's paradise. I've already saved up some money and your daddy will add some. He loves you. Carl changed the subject. No, he won't. You have a good salary, I have a good salary. We both do not pay for housing, so the wedding and the trip at our expense. That's Dad's deal. How much do you have in your account? You've been working for him for almost a year and it must be a lot of money. I didn't start work until much later, but I'm sure I've saved up for Malta. So you owe me a wedding and I owe you Malta, Rose said sarcastically and started to get dressed to go home. Wait a minute. That wasn't the deal. I thought Steve was organizing it. What kind of wedding do I have to organize? The wedding's in a month and a half and my account's almost empty. What's your daddy's new whim? The groom was indignant and even smoked, which he did very rarely and only in moments of great excitement. I don't quite understand. Where is all the money my father paid you? I work in finance and I know what your salary is. It's 1.5 times my salary. But you haven't even bought a car. You're still driving around in your company car. I don't demand gifts from you. Housing is free. Lunches at work are free for the staff. We almost always have dinner at our house. Maybe you've invested all your money somewhere. So you tell me where and when you expect the dividends. No? Well then I don't know how to help you. But the fact that you're empty doesn't mean you're going to have to pay for the wedding. Oh, don't pout. Yeah, it's just another one of my father's slightly ridiculous stipulations. It won't be a crowded wedding, so you'll be fine, I'm sure. With that, Rose slipped out the door of the servants' quarters, leaving her fiancé with a lot of unresolved problems and sad thoughts. Mom, hi. I'm sorry I don't call much. I've been all over the place. The wedding, the opening of Steve's new branch, and his new checkup on my soul. I can't believe he won't help us with the wedding. I don't understand him at all. Rose is his only daughter, and he's shutting us out. The wedding's so soon, and I'm broke. Mommy, I know you've been saving for my apartment. Can't you at least help me out? Don't be a grump. Yeah, I can't save money yet. But I didn't realize the banquet was going to be all on us. Steve surprises me more and more. Mom, I know him better than you do. He seems like a great guy on the surface. He's got more bugs in his head than all his employees combined. Help me, at least $1 million. I'll give it to him as soon as I take over one of his businesses as his son-in-law. Mommy, I love you. Thank you. You're the best. I love you. All right, Carl. I've made a tough decision for me today. You've been in engineering for too long. It's time to take it to the next level. Starting tomorrow, you're acting director of my new brainchild, the cereal feed mill. Here's a packet of documents for you to review. If you do well, I'll sign over the mill to my daughter, and then it's up to her. This will be the beginning of your family business. I have already calculated all the risks and concluded that the profitability of the enterprise is 100%. There are already the first customers, large livestock holdings and several large and stable farms. Proceed to your duties, and I am always there for you. I'll help you with advice, and I can give you a kick in the pants," Steve concluded in a more friendly manner, handing Carl the package of documents. "By the way, when is the wedding? Why do you keep procrastinating? Or haven't you saved up yet?" The summer is passing, and the dates keep getting pushed back and pushed back. Rose isn't talking either. "Are you trying to leave me without grandchildren?" During his first weeks as director of the company, Carl just lived at work. Rose tried not to disturb him. She worked and spent all her weekends at the cottage. She even learned to knit. Lizzie's neighbor strangely avoided her, as if she was offended by something. And even when Rose said hello to her over the fence, she answered dryly and ran straight into the house. Her boyfriend, Jonathan, Rose did not see at all. He must have left her. That's why she's depressed, Rose thought, and didn't bother asking. If she wanted to, she would tell her. At the end of August, when she arrived at the cottage for another weekend, Rose decided to do a general cleaning of the house. She collected dusty curtains from the windows, washed the windows and doors, and when she shoveled the dust from under the big bed in the bedroom, she found a small gold pendant with a small scorpion in a circle in the form of the letter O. I'd seen a pendant like that somewhere, but where or on whom? Rose sat down in the rocking chair and thought, remembering where and under what circumstances she might have seen such a piece of jewelry. Of course, it was the pendant of her neighbor Lisa, hence the letter O at the base of the pendant, and her birthday was in early November, hence the scorpion. Rose grabbed the find, and without a second thought ran to cheer up her neighbor. "Lizzie, look what I found in my house!" Rose shouted from the doorstep of Lizzie's house. Lizzie was talking to someone on the phone, but she jerked her hand away from her ear and stopped talking. "Didn't they teach you to knock?" she asked hostilely, her whole look saying that Rose had appeared in her house at a very inopportune moment. "Olga, what are you doing? It's me. You always knocked on my door too. What secrets can there be between us? We grew up together, and you taught me how to use makeup, and you were the first to tell me about all your affairs. And when I fell in love with Carl, I told you first. What's wrong with us? Are you in some kind of trouble? And why don't I see Jonathan? You two broke up? Don't feel bad. He didn't inspire confidence in me right away. I found your necklace under the bed. You must have dropped it last summer when we had mulled wine at my cottage and you fell asleep drunk. That was a good time. And I'm getting married to Carl in a month. We've saved up at last. Daddy said he gave us a chance to earn it ourselves. Well, you know my old man and his tests of self-reliance. By the way, you're invited to the wedding and the bachelorette party, which will also be held at the cottage. Here's your pendant, and don't pout. I still love you like a big sister." Rose turned on her heels and walked out of the house. Preparations for the wedding feast took a lot of time. After work, Rose ran to the stores, bridal salons, restaurants, and pastry stores. She came home late at night and fell into bed. To all this fuss, Carl tried not to involve Carl. He is now the director. He already has a mouthful of worries, she thought, and all the burdens have taken completely on himself. Together they bought only wedding rings, Carl, and ordered a wedding cake. 2 days before the wedding, they planned a bachelorette party at the Dacha. It was the middle of September. Indian summer was in full swing. The weather was sunny and warm. In the garden, still on the apple trees, hung late apples, began to crumble hawthorn. The closest friends were invited to the bachelorette party. 2 classmates, 1 classmate, a cousin on my father's side, twin neighbors in the townhouse, and Lizzie, a neighbor in the dacha. At the last moment, Lizzie called and, citing ill health and apologizing, warned that she couldn't come. Rose didn't like her mood and their relationship, but she didn't want to spoil her mood before the wedding and took it easy that Lizzie wouldn't be at the bachelorette party. The event had been fun. It came down to dancing and guitar songs, and around 8 in the evening the friends began to go home. "Rose, come to the city with us," suggested neighbor twins, who came in their own car. "No, I'll probably stay the night at the cottage. We have to clean up and close the cottage for the winter. After the wedding, we're going on a trip and won't be back until mid-October. We won't have time for the cottage. So thanks for coming." Rose thanked everyone, and after seeing the guests off, she started cleaning. She cleaned until almost 10 o'clock at night. She was tired and fell asleep right in the hall on a soft couch, covered with a warm blanket. She was awakened by some strange commotion at the front door. She quickly jumped up and looked out the window. No one was visible at the door. Probably cats or birds, thought the girl, and decided to move to the bedroom to sleep. The key rattled in the keyhole. Rose felt as if she had been doused with water from a dipper. From fright, she could not even scream, but only remembered who else has a key to the cottage. Dad has one and Carl has one. No one else. Dad called around 6 o'clock tonight. He wasn't going to the cottage. Carl's having a bachelor party tonight and he was already drunk around 9. No, not him. He's always drawn to sleep after these events. Rose instinctively grabbed the phone and started dialing her father's number. Dad, someone's trying to open the front door with his key. Is it you? Daddy, come over here. I'm really scared. The door was unlocked, and from the bedroom door, Rose saw the silhouette of a gnome, a dwarf, or a child. He walked into the room with a confident stride, as if he had been here often before. First, without turning on the light, he went into the kitchen and looked into the refrigerator. In the light of the open refrigerator, Rose saw a boy of about 7 or 8. He took a couple of slices of sausage from the leftover banquet trimmings, 1 brownie, and poured juice into a glass. Then he went into the hall, took the TV remote control from the table, and turned it on the channel where cartoons were on all day, and even at night. He sat on the couch where Rose had just slept, eating the juice he'd taken from the refrigerator. The girl, realizing that she was in no danger, came out of her hiding place behind the bedroom door. "You filthy thief," she said loudly. The boy was so frightened that he dropped the juice glass from his hand, which hit the floor and shattered. The juice spilled over the dark floor. The cream from the cake the boy was holding in his hand also fell out onto the floor. The boy roared loudly, either from fright or from the fact that his humble dinner had been so treacherously disrupted. "Daddy, don't fly like an eagle. It's all right. I'm in no danger. There's a child in the house. You're asking me? How do I know whose? Yeah, he had a key to the house. And he's obviously a regular visitor. Yeah, because he knows where things are and where they are. He's very good at navigating the house. I don't know his name. So far, he's just bawling and I don't know how to calm him down." While on the phone, there was a knock on the door and an older man with a club appeared on the doorstep. "Good night to you, young lady. Here he is again. Don't be afraid. This is my grandson, Mike. He's harmless. He's just stupid. It's my fault. I didn't watch him again." That's when Steve burst into the house, holding a crescent wrench. "Daughter, are you okay? Who are you? What are you doing here at night? Oh man, it's you. This is your house." There was a verbal pause. Steve immediately recognized the old man who had sold him this house 6 years ago. "And this is your grown-up grandson? What are you teaching him? Stealing from honest people by sneaking into their homes at night?" "No, I'm not. You've got it all wrong. It's that damned key. I wanted to throw it away, but I couldn't do it." And the old man, as he had once done 6 years ago, cried, putting his heavy hands on his beak and lowering his head. "I kept the key to the house as a memento of my ancestral nest. I was born in this house. Here my parents died. Here I fell in love, and here I experienced the great happiness of fatherhood. Here I buried my wife and took my grandson in my arms, having lost my son-in-law somewhere in the north of the country. My daughter died in another house. He kept the key as some warm memory of the years of happiness in this house. My daughter never got over the cursed disease. Mike was 5 years old. I was his only family. He's a smart kid. He asks me everything. He asked me about the key hanging over the door, and I told him everything. And once in spring we were walking with him and came here and I showed him my home. I woke up in the night and the boy was gone. I went to the yard, to the river, screaming, crying, and he was running home from the road. Grandpa, don't cry. I went to my home. It's beautiful there. I beat him then. I beat him badly. He didn't come back for a long time. I hid the key. He told me he went to see it during the day. On weekends, a beautiful girl lives there, he said. She makes jam from berries, plants flowers. Then she leaves, and he finds the key. And after the weekend, he goes back to the house. Then he takes a tasty piece from the fridge, then he eats jam from a bowl. And if he drinks something, he'll always clean up the dishes. And then our TV set burned down, so he started watching cartoons almost every other day. And today I woke up, the boy was gone again, and it's nighttime. I can't keep up with him. I'm getting old. But he's my only joy. I don't care if you kill me. The old man finished his story and started to take the boy home. The conflict was over, Rose completely calmed down and offered the boy at any time to come to the house, treat himself to food from the fridge, and watch his favorite cartoons. In fact, Mike, I'll set up a room for you. If you want, you can stay up all night and watch as many cartoons as you want. I'll warn the neighbors not to chase you away, Rose offered, which caused the boy's frenzied delight and a warm, grateful smile on his grandfather's face. The wedding day had been a mess since the morning. The weather was gloomy and windy, and by evening they promised a downpour. Rose was not satisfied with her hair, and the veil was not attached to her hair. During the frantic preparations for the wedding, the girl lost weight and the dress became a little big. No one noticed it, but Rose was nervous and almost cried when her father called her a doll when he saw her in the wedding dress. Yes, a doll, with a stupid hairdo, a veil, and a dress 2 sizes too big. I hate all these stupid weddings, the outfits, the hairstyles, and the crowds of guests with their congratulations. How nice it would be just to sign in the registry office and sit at home with the closest loved ones, or even go to the country so that no one sees. Almost through tears, Rose said, straightening the unruly hem of her wedding dress. And I had a bad dream today. It was as if I was walking down the aisle not in my wedding dress, but in a dirty, shabby dress. And all the guests were laughing and pointing their fingers at me. And Carl didn't recognize me at all and started laughing, saying, "What kind of a scarecrow is trying to become my bride?" Dad, I don't feel at ease. It's like something or someone is trying to keep me from making a rash move. Do you believe in premonitions? Don't laugh. I'm serious. Remember you said that your grandmother was a witch and could predict many things and interpret dreams? What if I am too? Rose asked sadly, hugging herself to her father as if she needed his protection and support now. It's all nonsense, child. It's just that the bad weather has upset you. And your hair is lovely, your veil and your dress. But your Carl will not recognize you today, because you look like a queen, and there is no one in the whole world more beautiful than my girl. Steve tried to calm his daughter affectionately. Contrary to all Rose's premonitions, the wedding was fun and without incident. It rained in the evening, but no one cared. The guests drank, partied, danced, participated in contests organized by the Toastmaster, and all Rose's fears were forgotten like a bad dream. Well, daughter, where are your fears now? In the past life remained? Laughed father, dancing with his daughter, touching dance of the bride. Dear guests and newlyweds, Steve stood up from the table and began, please pay attention for a moment. I have a message for the young people. I don't want to say much. Everything has already been said. I have only one daughter, and only she will one day get everything that I have accumulated and built. But no one has canceled gifts yet. My son-in-law. I also checked for strength. A good, smart, and efficient guy. He copes with all the tasks, so I give the new factory and the old sugar factory to the new family. Work, multiply, expand my life's work. And I'm tired. I'll watch from the sidelines. And you, my daughter, I don't think you need to get into business. A woman should maintain a home, give birth to children, and wait for her husband from work. That's the right thing to do. The guests applauded, and Carl almost lost his tongue from the wealth that fell on him. For the first half a minute he just kept silent, constantly clutching his head and drinking mineral water with dry mouth. Thank you, Daddy. I don't mind staying home and waiting for my husband to come home from work. Husband, can you manage without me? Rose asked Carl playfully. And I have no options. I will work since my favorite father-in-law gave me such a trust. To be honest, I'm still in shock and cannot think rationally. Thank you. I won't let you down. With these words, father-in-law and son-in-law embraced like father and son-in-law. Carl's mom stood and wiped her tears of happiness. She could not have imagined a better life for her son. A day later, they left on their wedding trip. You know, Rose, you're my lucky ticket. Don't think I'm with you for money and personal gain. You'll see. I'm totally worthy of your father's trust. I've got so many ideas in my head right now, it's like it's gonna explode. You, most importantly, provide me with a reliable rear, so that when I come home after work, I know that I am welcome and loved. God, how happy I am, Carl exclaimed enthusiastically as they flew over the sea and looked at the island, which for the next 2 weeks would become their earthly paradise. I don't really want to get up and go to work every day. In fact, I dream of moving to the countryside. It's so beautiful there. No worse than in this Mediterranean paradise. In summer, I'll plant flowers, Pick berries from the plot. And in winter I'll knit you warm sweaters and socks. And I also want to have children. I am the only one in the family, so sometimes I was lonely in a big house. And we will have many children, and I will be such a mommy." Rose shared her dreams before the stewardess announced the landing and asked to fasten the belts. The 2 weeks on the Azure coast flew by quickly. Steve called every day and reminded her that he wanted grandchildren and to get away on vacation sooner, entrusting his empire to the young. Rose and Carl laughed and promised to work hard to fulfill their father's dream of procreation, especially since the environment was very conducive to it. But the day of departure for the homeland had arrived. Suitcases are packed, souvenirs and gifts are carefully packed. Strangely enough, her father did not call in the morning, as usual, or before the flight. Rose was wary and decided to call herself. There was no answer, and it was only on the third time that Rose heard a distressed voice. "Yes, baby. Daddy's on the phone." "Daddy, what's wrong? I don't like the sound of your voice," Rose asked worriedly. "My joints are stiff as hell. Fall, rain, aggravation. I could barely stand up today. Couldn't even go to work because my knees were so swollen I had to get crutches. Come on, let's go home. I need to rest. Let your Carl work now, and I guess I've done my time." Steve squeaked into the phone a little more and then disconnected. Rose felt uneasy. Her father was always so agile and restless, and now he's completely lost it. He was getting older, and the years were taking their toll. "What's the mood?" "Autumn is always the height of all his ailments. Once he's cured, he'll take the reins from me again. You know your father, he's a real live wire." But Rose was seriously concerned about the health of the person closest to her. "When we get home, I'll take him to the cottage. There's air, no negative environment, and complete peace and quiet. But first you and I will go there and clean up the house. And Daddy will go to the doctor's, maybe get some treatment," Rose said, calming down a little, and zipped up the last of her suitcases. "Daddy, we're home!" she shouted, entering the house and throwing her purse on the shelf in the hallway. Carl was outside, paying off the cab driver and bringing the suitcases onto the porch. There was no answer. Dad wasn't home. Where the hell was he? Just yesterday he couldn't get out of bed, and today he's probably out at work again, giving orders left and right, Rose muttered under her breath as she dialed her father's number. "Yes, kitten." "No, not at work. I'm at the hospital. I was so twisted I had to call an ambulance and now I'm in the hospital. I don't need anything. I've got everything here. You get some rest after your flight and come see me tomorrow. Don't worry about it. This off-season, it's always been a little disruptive. Tell Carl to bring the documents on all the objects to my hospital. I'll give him the files." Steve asked more positively. "So Carl, now a couple of hours for a rest, and then we'll go to the cottage. Dad asked me to bring all the documents to the hospital tomorrow. You will take the cases. We'll clean up the cottage. We need to check the heating. It'll be cold soon, and Dad needs warmth." "Oh, there's a lot to do," fussed the girl, throwing things in the closets after the trip. They arrived at the cottage when it started to get dark. "Rose, there's a light on. Was it Dad and left it on, or did someone get in?" Carl was wary and even put the car behind the fence so as not to scare away unexpected visitors. "No, Dad would never leave the lights on. You know how frugal and meticulous he is about it. We'll figure it out," she said confidently, and entered the house first. "Jesus, Mike, you scared us. I'd forgotten that you came here sometimes. My husband and I thought the thieves had gotten in," Rose said calmly, and put her arm around the boy's shoulders. "Rose, would you please explain to me who this boy is and what he's doing here in the absence of the owners?" Carl was concerned about the situation. "Aunt Rose, I know this uncle. I've seen him here a couple of times, but not with you, but with another woman. I think it was your neighbor Lizzie. I saw them go into the house and then come out about 2 hours later. I sat out on the veranda the whole time and watched. They were laughing like they knew each other very well. I'm not lying. And once this uncle even spent the night here and brought a lot of food with him. There was music playing in the house and I could hear a woman's voice," Mike said confidently about his observations of the house. Rose just couldn't find anything to say. She didn't want to confront her husband in front of the boy, but something in her soul was breaking. She remembered the pendant she'd found under the bed, Lisi's reluctance to come to the bachelorette party and wedding, her cold and suspiciously distant attitude toward Rose lately. Babe, couldn't you have been mistaken? Maybe it wasn't this uncle, but someone else. The girl tried to find out, while Carl, red from the near revelation, was searching for words of justification. I have good eyesight, and your neighbor, after your uncle's departure, came into the house again to clean up. I was in the house at the time, hiding in the closet. Carl, we'll talk later. Don't try to dust me and make excuses now, Rose said sternly. Why do you trust some boy you've known for a week? What kind of a bum you've got here, and why am I the last to know about it? Carl was indignant and even tried to push the boy out of the room. Don't you dare. This is not a homeless person, but the grandson of the former owner of this house, a decent and respectable man. And I don't have to answer to you for my decisions about my property. For now, Daddy and I are the owners of this cottage. What you've been doing here in our absence is still an open question. Mike, you can go home now. Uncle Carl-Louis and I need to clean up the cottage. My dad is sick, and I want him to stay here for a while until he's better, she said affectionately. Yes, of course. I have to go to the store anyway. My grandfather asked me to buy some bread and milk. Goodbye. See you again. With these words, the boy, grabbing the bag that stood at the doorstep, ran out into the street and headed towards a small store near the railroad. Just don't jump to conclusions. Carl began to explain the ridiculous situation. Yes, I was at the cottage a couple of times without you. Lizzie had nothing to do with it. It was just that Jonathan had left her that day and she was a little out of sorts. And then I came to take the measurements of the windows on the veranda. You know, you asked me to, and I had some free time on my hands. So Lizzie came by when she saw the car. She thought you were here to cry about her hard life and Jonathan's cheating. She was a bit tipsy and I couldn't get her out. She hung around while I was doing my business, telling me how lucky you were to have me, that I was a real man and not her gigolo Jonathan. What was I supposed to do? Kick her out? All right. What about the second time? What lady wanted to cry on your shoulder again but with appetizers and music? Rose asked, checking every room in the house to see if there was another crybaby. There was no lady. I came to the cottage alone when you made me realize that I was paying for the wedding, and I didn't have any money at all. I was upset. I bought some wine and some food and came here. I had a drink and turned on the TV where there was a musical on. That's where the music and the women's laughter came from. I fell asleep and slept till morning. Remember you called me many times and I didn't answer? In the morning, having seen a lot of missed calls, I hurried to the city and asked Lizzie to clean the house and even gave her money for it and left the key to the Dasha. She probably still has it. We should get it back. Carl's excuses sounded so convincing that Rose couldn't even dig at his perfectly coherent story. Okay, I won't dig into the whole Lizzie keys and women's laughter thing. I'm not going to get divorced because of the boy's story and speculation, especially since he's too young and you've given me no reason to be jealous and I can't suspect you of anything wrong, just from what other people say. Let's just pretend this conversation never happened and start cleaning the cottage. In the morning, Rose and Carl went to the hospital to see her father. The girl was still depressed after yesterday's conversation with her husband and still had some doubts, but she didn't want to show her father that she was worried about anything. On the contrary, she drew in a full chest of air and gave a slight smile on her face before entering the room. The sight that opened to her eyes was horrifying. Her father lay on the bed, pale and quiet, not at all like he was in his normal life. Jesus, Daddy, what's the matter with you? You told me yesterday it was nothing, and what do I see? The girl resented Steve's untruthful assessment of her condition. Don't be a hurt girl. Yes, I lied a little, but everything is solvable. I've got some gout. I haven't quite figured out what it is yet, but it's not fatal. You need a special diet and medication, said the sick man with an exhausted smile and tried to sit up on the bed. He did it badly, and even Carl, who tried to help him sit up, rejected all attempts. No, you'd better lie down, Steve. Oh, Dad. Lying down. You look more like an upright man, but sitting down you're just a wreck. His son-in-law tried to joke ineffectually, but stopped when he saw his wife's judgmental look. Well, joke to me here. I'll see how you will cope with all my work and how many days you will give up and come running for help, replied Steve, offended at the ridiculous joke of his son-in-law. I won't. Let's make a bet. I'll start work tomorrow, and you heal here. And then you can go to the cottage, Rose will look after you, and in a couple of months I'll bring you a full report. We'll see about that. By the way, here are all the papers on the transfer of business and assets of all companies." Carl handed Steve 3 folders with documents. "Keep them. I'll sign them later. I can't even bend my fingers without an injection. Now my sister will inject me with a dose of some stuff and I'll jump like an antelope. You don't believe me?" "Well, don't believe me," Steve said with feigned resentment and put the folders with documents on the nightstand. "Come back tomorrow. Everything will be signed and notarized. In the meantime, go. I'm tired of your chatter and jokes," Steve grumbled and even closed his eyes. "I don't like Dad's condition. Let's go and talk to the doctor. Can I give him some money or get some expensive medicine?" Rose suggested and ran to the resident's room. "Well, what can I tell you? It's a serious situation. I diagnosed your father 5 years ago and just tearfully begged him at least a couple times a year to be treated in a hospital." "And he did what?" "He's only been to see me twice in all these years, and that was to get me to prescribe him strong painkillers. He breaks his diet. I can see it from the tests. He doesn't exercise. He doesn't sleep enough. He works a lot. He doesn't go to physiotherapy at all. Well, at least you have an impact, or he'll sit down and won't get up again. And it's good if he just sits down, but he might even go blind." "This is not a joke," the attending physician warned her sternly and handed Rose a list of medicines that were not in the hospital, but which could help Steve at least a little at first. 5 years. I knew nothing, and he was silent. He ate his vegetable purees and lied that it was for weight loss because he was afraid of getting fat. I wondered if he'd got a woman to keep him in shape, but it was more serious than that. Rose was terrified, and her heart ached for her father. How could it be, her father, an unbreakable rock, support, and here is almost helpless invalid? Steve wasn't discharged until a month later. Carl coped well with his duties to manage a huge business empire, but only thanks to the help of his wife. Rose spent hours on the phone, calling customers, meeting with investors, drawing up documents for deliveries. At the same time, she was still pulling the whole house, cooking, laundry, and had time to visit her father in the hospital. On the day of discharge, Steve drove straight from the hospital to the main office to familiarize himself with the affairs of the firms. No matter how much he tried to find flaws in the work of his son-in-law and daughter, but the shortcomings almost did not find. Business in all directions was excellent, without overlaps and complaints from clients. Business worked like a Swiss watch. Well, son-in-law, respect. And I, to be honest, giving you all the rights to manage, very much doubted the result. It's time to retire. The business is in good hands. I have reliable people in my firm. They've been working for years. You rely on them. They won't let you down. No way. I realize the old guard has a lot of experience, but I need someone with a modern way of thinking. And I'm sorry, but I want to fire some of your old team. They're no longer up to the task. They're not good with computers, they're old school, and it's slowing down the business. I'll give them a good severance package, and in their place I'll hire young and promising employees. Since you've given me your responsibilities, I want to use your rights. That's out of the question. Carl was so adamant that Steve didn't even dare to object. All right, I'll do it. One condition. You keep the one person I can't fire. He's been around since the beginning of my business, and even if he's no longer able to cope with his duties now, let him just go to work. You can't fire him. He's in purchasing. His family died in an accident 2 years ago, and his job is all he has left. If we take away the job we love, we're burying the man, Steve asked kindly. No problem. I've got a heart too. Let him work. He seems to be doing okay. We'll teach him some office equipment and let him work. But just one of him. Don't ask for more. The cuts will be significant and irreversible. I realize you'll be getting calls from old employees complaining, but don't pick up the phone or turn it off. Hey, why don't you and Rose go to the cottage for a while? She needs her rest and you need some fresh air. I'll come and see you every week and report back. Understand, Steve, it is necessary to raise the business to a new level. Without new trends, it will simply become obsolete and rot. Carl tried to convince his father-in-law, bringing new arguments that would justify his such unpopular steps. Do as you see fit. I've lost my temper. I'm sitting here and I don't understand anything. It's the meds, I guess. And age. I'll take my daughter to the country house. My health's not so good. I don't tell Rose anything. I don't want to upset her. Maybe some fresh air and rest will really get me back on my feet. although I don't really believe that anymore. All right, I've got procedures. Get to work. Tomorrow we'll go to the countryside. Today is the last treatment the doctor ordered. And you must come back every weekend and report on your work. And you can't leave your wife alone for too long. Be well." With these words, Steve left the office and, limping on both legs, staggered to the exit. "Dad, I understand that your health is important, but let's hire a nurse. I can't leave the firm and my husband now when so much is at stake." Rose resented her father's decision to move to the cottage with her. "You're my only daughter and I want you to take care of me on my worst days. And Carl can handle it, and it won't take long, a couple months. I'll be sure to let you go by New Year's Eve. Right now I need your support. I'm also against a woman getting involved in business. She's supposed to have children, take care of the house and bake pies. If you both go to work, it'll be the ruin of the strongest family. That's my decision, and you can't cross me." Steve said it like he said it. In early November, snow fell, hiding all the dirt and unsettledness of the city and its surroundings. Here on the first snow, Rose and Steve went to their quiet, cozy corner on the shore of the lake. The first days, Rose missed the city apartment, her husband, and her work. But over the weekend, Carl arrived, bringing a bunch of gifts and things to set up the country life. Steve wasn't feeling well, often mumbling inappropriately, eating poorly, and constantly complaining of joint and back pain. The medication wasn't helping much, but Carl had brought some foreign remedy that made Steve sleep well and complain less. "Well, thank God, at least Daddy's sleeping well at night. I used to get so tired and sleepless with him." "Thank you, Carl." Rose thanked him when they were alone in their room. "I'm sorry that you have to bear all his complaints and grievances alone, but you know I have work. I can't drive your father. I promised. It's hard for me too. There's a total turnover of personnel at the companies. People are dissatisfied. They write complaints to various authorities. I'm plagued with inspections and I can't do otherwise. I'm paying back pay to all the people I've fired, which is a huge amount of money. Do you make sure your father doesn't turn on his cell phone? He doesn't need this kind of upheaval right now. He won't even go near it. He's put it away. He's gotten so bad. I can't get him outside. He's always whining and watching the news on TV. He's arguing with newscasters, watching stupid TV shows. Is this really the end? I didn't think the disease would take him out of action so quickly. Although, 5 years, the doctor said. 5 years he didn't want treatment, and this is the result. Carl, you should come back more often. I miss you. I'll go crazy here until New Year's Eve," Rose wailed, snuggling up to her husband. Throughout November, Carl regularly visited his wife and father-in-law at the cottage. He spoiled them with various goodies. Rose brought various materials for needlework, and her life became more interesting and rich. On the first weekend in December, the husband did not come to the cottage, referring to employment. Rose was very upset by this fact. She missed her husband and, with him, at least for a while, distracted from the eternal and monotonous muttering and dissatisfaction of his father. "Carl, I don't ask much of you. It's not more than an hour and a half to the village. I understand that you are tired at work, but here you can have a good rest. I don't burden you with housework. You don't even talk to your father much. If you don't come next weekend, I'll come myself. I'll go to the office and see what kind of things are there that do not let you go to your family," the woman told her husband on the phone and hung up. On Sunday evening, there was a knock at the house on the lake shore. "Who is there?" Rose answered cautiously, taking her time to open the door. No one came to the house at this late hour. "Rose, open up." Rose heard the voice of her dad, a co-worker and just a family friend who had lost his family 2 years ago. "Jack, what a surprise. What are you doing here? And how did you find us?" With obvious joy in her voice, asked the girl, letting the guest into the house. "Hello, daughter." He always called Rose his daughter. She was the same age as his dead daughter. "A great need has brought me here. You and Steve are all holed up here, and you don't know what's going on at the firm. You could have left an address or called me when you got here. Steve's phone's off and you've changed your number or can't get through here. I can't get through. I asked my husband for your phone number, but he wouldn't give it to me, the bastard." Jack was indignant, taking off his jacket and shoes. "Why did you call my husband such an unkind name?" the woman asked. "A lousy man is a lousy man, whatever you call him. And that was a mild way of putting it," replied his father's friend, loudly and with resentment in his voice, and sat down to the table. "Where is Steve? I have a serious talk with him." "What's wrong?" "He's asleep. He's been asleep since 8 o'clock at night when he takes the sleeping pills Carl brought him, and he sleeps all night. He can't be woken up by a gun," Rose said and put the kettle on the stove. "Carl, you say, brought the pills? Well, it makes a lot of sense to me now. What's the matter? You mean the redundancies? Carl's recruiting a new team. He and his father have agreed on it." "Well, Jack, everyone who started the firm with my father in the early 2000s is old and doesn't understand a lot of things. This firm needs to be taken to the next level. That's what your husband told you. Good level. 40 people from 4 branches fired, took 2 crooked lawyers, who have already 2 branches for sale, and a new secretary got himself a new secretary. That's it. That's all the new staff. Did Steve sign anything the last time that prick was in your office? You don't know? Why are you even here? You're supposed to watch your dad and be with him when he's not well. Do you know that he signed his son-in-law's name? He transferred all the assets and companies to himself. It's a disaster. On Thursday, he's selling 2 companies to a local criminal mastermind for nothing. What a shame. The employees of the firms are cursing Steve and swearing at him. I, as a thief, snuck into the office of this bastard and saw the documents myself. I got the address of the cottage. Don't give me any more of those pills your husband brought. They've made a fool out of your father and you don't give a damn. Tomorrow we'll go to the city and file a lawsuit to invalidate the transfer of the company to another name. It's all notarized, though. He's got his own people everywhere. Steve to the tests. You have to prove that when he signed the documents, he was not himself, and under the influence of drugs. We can still prove that. And take the pills with you. We'll get them to forensics. Your house is a mess. This one's having a blast with the new secretary. He's taken all the company cars from the management and sold some of them. Said he needed a new injection into the business. But I don't see any new injections. Why are you standing there? Pack your things. We're all going into town tomorrow morning." Rose almost fainted at the words. She began to rush around the house, frantically gathering up her father's things and her own. Tears choked her, and the only thought in her head was, "It's not true. It's just a bad dream." "Jack, Daddy's not well. He can't go now. Let's do it without him. Have the paramedics come down here and take his blood and whatever else they need. I'll have a grandfather and his grandson look after him while I'm gone. He's useless now anyway. He can't solve anything." Rose pleaded. "All right. That's what we'll do. Let's not bother the old man, or we'll make things worse." Rose did not sleep. The world around her collapsed, crying a sea of tears. She came out of the bedroom in the morning collected and outwardly calm. The step from love to hate was a long night. In the morning we reached the former owner of the house and asked him to look after Steve for a couple of days. The old man, though he was already in his late teens, agreed. Even the neighbor Lizzie, seeing in the morning that Rose was going to leave, came to find out what was the matter and whether her help is not required. "Well, all alienated Maria, and now what has changed?" Rose asked her former friend reproachfully. "Many things have changed. You are good, but your husband is a bastard. He lied to you that I just came by for fun. I had an affair with him before your marriage and you found my pendant under the bed for a reason. I was ashamed of myself in front of you, so I didn't talk to you, and I didn't go to the bachelorette party, and I didn't go to the wedding. Your husband has only money and position in his eyes. He's a bastard, not a human being." About 10 o'clock in the morning, Steve woke up, and seeing strangers at home, even swelled up. He didn't recognize Toporkov at all and stared at his old friend's face for a long time. "Jack, are you there? What on earth brought you here?" he asked in a detached and unfriendly way. Toporkov described the situation to him in a nutshell and was simply numbed when Steve calmly, and even with a slight chuckle, answered him that it was all bullshit or jealousy on the part of the latter of his son-in-law's successes. Jack couldn't even find anything to say. He just got dressed and walked out the door saying, "To hell with it." Rose ran out after him. "Jack, don't be angry. You can see he's not himself. Lizzie and Grandpa Sean will look after him." "What are you doing here? My daughter left me and you're just happy to see her." Steve grumbled at Grandpa and Lizzie. "You're a fool, dear man. Your daughter went to rescue your wealth and you're scolding her for nothing. I've brought you some herbs to drink instead of pills, which your son-in-law used to poison you and turn you into a silent vegetable. They won't help you right away. It's not drugs. It's valerian root and a stalk of pistopolis. Now I'll brew it and take 3 tablespoons twice a day like a bayonet. Lizzie, you'll see to it. And here is a tablespoon of bee feathers on an empty stomach. It'll support your immune system and relieve swelling in your legs. I'll have you back on your feet in a month. I offered to help your daughter, but she turned her nose up, saying doctors know better. My wife was a great herbalist. She got a lot of people back on their feet. I know some things too, and I still have her notes. We used to collect herbs together. I know them like the back of my hand. Licorice root and peony for your joints. There's a lot of acid in you. It settles on your joints and prevents you from moving. I suffered from it myself, but as you can see, I came to you today without a stick in the snow. Grandfather continued to list various recipes of folk medicine while Steve ate breakfast. By lunchtime, Rose showed up at the main office. Carl was even taken aback and speechless when he saw his wife in his office. Rose, how are you here? Did you bring your father to the hospital? Is he worse? Playfully, affectionately asked her husband. No, darling. Daddy's fine. I came to throw you out of this chair and out of my life forever. By the way, I've already dragged your secretary out of our house by the hair. By the way, do you know what she was doing there? Oh, I'm sorry. You sent her to our house to get the documents you forgot today. And she changed into a bathrobe for some reason and just started making coffee in the kitchen of our house. You always find an explanation for everything, don't you? Well, I'm clear about the Lizzie thing, she confessed it. But I still have a lot of questions for you about everything else. Rose pressed her husband, throwing the facts he was hiding in his face. I don't care if you know everything. I signed over the last of the firm to myself today, and you and your flighty father are as poor as I was 2 years ago. I'll sell it all for whatever the lowest price is and leave this backwater for a warm place where I don't have to see your arrogant faces. I'm sick of you. How tired I am of you. Carl almost shouted and shook some papers in front of Rose's face. He did not even notice how 2 men entered the office. Carl, you're under arrest for economic fraud and embezzlement. Let's go. Carl stammered and turned pale, as if he had just been sentenced to death. He silently followed the officers of the law, without even looking at his wife, who stood in the office doorway. Finita la comedy, he said ironically, and exhaled as if he had dropped a huge weight from his shoulders. But how did the operatives arrive so quickly? We just came from the village? Rose wondered. I submitted some documents to the police on Friday for examination. But do not be deceived. The evidence base is weak. Your father himself signed a waiver of everything, and prove otherwise will be difficult. Maybe this crook has already taken money for part of the company, and maybe something else. Let's fight. Too bad Steve still looks like an amoeba. We have to bring him to his senses somehow. The trial was scheduled for early April. All this time, Carl was under a non-departure order and lived in a rented apartment on the outskirts of the city. Steve slowly came to his senses after the drugs, which provided him with his son-in-law, and Grandpa Sean pulled him out of depression and put him on his feet with his herbs and lotions. Grandpa, you're worthless, Steve repeated, doing exercises and bending both legs freely at the knees, as if he had become 10 years younger. It is you just started treatment. A year of my herbs and we'll marry you again. Grandpa Sean laughed. Rose divorced Carl. At the trial, he looked pathetic and lost. On the questions of the judge answered without raising his head. Rose looked at him and did not understand how she could love this man, how she did not listen to the doubts of his father. Carl, being in complete ignorance in Steve's condition, hoped that the loopy, sick old man would not be able to prove that he had not voluntarily handed over his business to him. Carl carefully prepared for the defense, hiring the most expensive lawyers on the money stolen from the business. At the trial, he was just stunned to see Steve in good health and with a huge evidence base, which revealed all his machinations, starting almost from the first day of his management of the business. The legal battle lasted a long time. Carl's attorneys honestly earned their fees. The judge did not render a decision until closer to the fall. Steve was fully returned to his business, and the former son-in-law received a real sentence with a multi-million-dollar compensation for material and moral damage. Steve was not a mean person, and right at the trial asked the judge to soften the sentence and not to give a real term. Very sorry for Carl's mother, Wendy. She was at the trial and looked destroyed, crushed by her own son. The court found the plaintiff's request reasonable, for Carl would hardly be able to pay compensation while in prison. Carl's sentence was changed to probation. With a suspended sentence, Carl was hired reluctantly, and only for the lowest wages and very hard physical labor. And here Steve showed himself at his best, taking a shallow former son-in-law to his work as an ordinary engineer for maintenance of ventilation equipment, taking 50% of his earnings in the account of his debt to the company. "Hi, Grandpa. How are you? I see your grandson has become quite big." Steve said hello to Grandpa Sean, his savior. Steve once again came to the cottage to visit his daughter, who now lived there permanently, so as not to meet in a small town with her ex-husband. "So we have a TV set now. What should he do at your place?" Smoking another cigarette, Grandpa Sean replied with a smile. "No news from your son-in-law? Maybe I can help? I have connections in the police and money." Steve offered his help. "What do connections and money have to do with a man who's gone to ground? I don't think he's alive, or he wouldn't have abandoned his family, his sick wife and unborn child. He wasn't the right man, believe me." "Well, I'll give it a shot, but I'll give it a shot. I have a man in a big volunteer organization we served together. I was a warrant officer, and he was a conscripted soldier. I saved him from hazing then. He is grateful to me to this day. He sends me postcards, and now he writes on the internet. He lives nearby, in a neighboring region. He once told me that there are people who can't remember their loved ones because of memory loss. Then they are put in hospices and given jobs. If they're believers, they're taken to monasteries. They stay there. Some then remember their relatives and return to their families. And some have nowhere to return to. Their wives are married, their children don't remember them, and their parents are dead. He even told me a case of a man who had been a slave for many years. Yes, grandfather, it happens. They beat him there, and one day they knocked his memory out. Then the police caught the slave owners, sent the former slaves home, and this man doesn't know who he is or where he came from. So they put him in this hospice. And 3 years later, he went from the hospice with the head cook to another city, and a passerby recognized him there. His wife was going crazy, and when he went to his house, he remembered everything. So I'll write to the guy I know? At least give me a photo of my son-in-law? Maybe some documents? He had all the documents with him. Here's a photo. He's still a young man, can't you admit it now? It's been 8 years. You try, Steve. What the hell? I've been through all the channels. I've been on the police force. I've put up flyers. I've written for a TV show. You know the TV show that used to be on? Well, here we are. I don't know where else to write. But the boy needs his father. Even though he didn't know him, he still waits and hopes that his father will be found. The old man concluded sadly and smoked again. The answer to the inquiry came 2 months later. A man, very similar in description, about the same age, build and appearance, with a birthmark under the left shoulder blade and a scar on the wrist of the right hand, is in the hospice at the address. He was found at a railroad crossing with no money, no identification, and a broken head. After treatment in the hospital, he wandered around for a long time, as he had partially lost his memory and could not remember his name or where he was from. He only remembered that he was married and that his wife was expecting a child. Requests for his identity had not been answered. 2 years ago, he was admitted to a hospice where he remains to this day. Steve just flew to his grandfather with that letter. "Grandpa, Grandpa, where the hell have you been?" shouted Steve, entering the empty house of Sean's case. "Well, what are you yelling about, sweet man? I'm cutting grass for the rabbits behind the bathhouse. You're scaring me," Grandpa replied sternly, taking the scythe off his shoulder. "Grandfather, I've received a reply to your inquiry. I had given up hope, and then I saw a big envelope in the mailbox. I never checked the box. Nobody writes letters nowadays. The internet is everywhere, and here it is. For some reason, I understood it all at once. Grandpa, read it quickly. Why are you standing there like you're encased in concrete?" Grandpa's hands were shaking. Trying not to show that he was very worried, Grandpa Sean searched the house for glasses, then put them on for a long time, and, taking the letter with shaking hands, began to read. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I printed it out. I couldn't resist." Steve tried to justify himself. After reading to the end, Grandpa Sean sat down on the sofa and quietly, in a manly way without sobs and lamentations, cried. Grandpa and Steve drove together to pick up their son-in-law. Rose stayed behind to look after Mike. and she couldn't find a place to sit because of the long wait. The boy, on the contrary, behaved calmly and confidently said that he was no longer an orphan, that his father would recognize and love him, even though he had never seen him. Steve's car arrived at the house where the landlady and Mike were waiting, and a sturdy man of about 33 came out of it. He was confident and walked straight toward the house. At first, though, he looked at him as if he were remembering something. Then, reaching the iron gate, he threw his hand over the fence and fumbled for the latch. No one had ever tightened it. "It's still stuck," said the stranger gravely, and opened the gate. "Wow, what a yard. It's beautiful. Who arranged it like this? Grandfather, didn't you?" Rose came out onto the porch. She was holding Mike's hand, who kept trying to break free and run toward his father. "That's not my wife. Who is this woman? And whose baby is this?" the man said slowly and uncertainly, and looked at the boy's features. "Daddy, it's me, Mike. Don't you recognize me? I look like you." That's what Grandpa always said and cried afterward. He cried a lot. The boy did pull out his hand and threw himself on his father's neck. Even Steely Steve cried. Rose and neighbor Lizzie sobbed, hugging each other and wiping away tears with the kitchen towel that had been on Rose's shoulder when the guest arrived. She went outside with him like that. Tim, that was the name of old Sean's son-in-law, remembered almost everything except that his wife was gravely ill. Apparently his memory was shielding him from heavy memories. When he learned that the house no longer belonged to them, he was saddened, but with confidence in his voice he said, "I have a son now. We'll build a new one, no worse than this one." Then he said a polite hello to Rose and Lizzie and thanked them for helping his grandfather raise his son. Mike stopped coming over, Rose sighed, pouring her father a large cup of tea. "He's got a father now, and we're not related to him." "Well, stop crying. It's time to have children of your own," cheerfully and at the same time strictly said the father, who came from the city to visit his daughter. "Who am I supposed to have them from? Grandpa Sean? Lizzie and I are lost without men, and we don't want to go to the city anyway. Somebody's going to cheat us again. We can't trust anyone. So we'll stay as girls." Rose finished laughing and even stomped her foot as in a dance. "Not all cheaters. You can find decent ones. You at least on the internet with whom you met. There I have a chief accountant in the firm, 38 years old, 2 children, and you know what kind of man she snatched. On the internet, by the way. He works for me as a welder now. He's a great guy." "Oh, Dad, you listen to you. So and my ex was not worth the price." Rose contradicted her father and sat down to drink tea. There was a knock at the door and smiling Mike appeared on the threshold. "Wow, what delicious candy you have on the table." "Help yourself, my dad brought them from the city. They're my favorites," Rose offered and invited the boy to the table. "Why did I come here?" the boy tried to say, stuffing his mouth full of candy from the vase. "I wanted to invite you to visit. It's Grandpa's birthday today. Dad went to town, bought a present and a cake. When he saw Steve was here, he told me to call you. So you'll come?" "They'll scold me for not inviting you," the boy complained as he continued to fill his mouth with candy. "Well, we won't let such a worthy young man be scolded, will we, Rose?" "Of course we'll come. We'll finish our tea without candy and then we'll come," Steve promised, laughing at the boy's appetite. Not knowing why, Rose took a long time to choose her outfit for the evening and carefully styled her hair. "I'm just going to my grandfather's birthday party, aren't I? What's wrong with me? Why do I want to look so stunning?" the woman thought, taking her hair into a beautiful bun and fastening it with a beaded barrette. Tim had stopped by Rose's house a couple times before that day. The first time to thank her again for helping his grandfather and his son. The second time he asked to see if his toolbox was in the closet or attic to fix the cross on his wife's and mother-in-law's grave. The box was indeed in the attic. The man thanked the landlady for the safety of the tools and departed. After her last visit, Rose had the idea that she had a great deal of sympathy for this short-talking, stern-looking man. It was evident that he had never betrayed anyone, had no malice toward anyone. He even forgave in his heart those people who many years ago hit him on the head and took all the money he earned on watch. Only he really regretted not burying his wife and raising his son for so many years. Was he a bit out of his depth, or had hard fate made him that way? But Rose realized she was thinking about him a lot and couldn't control herself about it. When Rose and Steve drove up to Sean's grandfather's house, there was no limit to their surprise. In the couple of months that had passed since Tim's return, the house had been transformed from a dilapidated shack into quite a nice structure. "Tim, wouldn't you like to work for me? I need such specialists." Steve immediately showed his entrepreneurial acumen. "No thanks. I'm not going anywhere. I haven't seen my family long enough to leave again. A local farmer offered me a job and it pays well. It's enough to live on. We don't need much. And the school is close by and the place is beautiful. What more could I want?" Rose listened with interest to the men's conversation and was glad that Tim did not give in to Steve's entreaties. Steve sat at his grandfather's house for half an hour, congratulated him, and went home. He had a lot of things to do and everything. "Aunt Rose, at least stay. I'm having fun with you. Grandpa's always nagging, and Daddy works and makes me do homework at night. Let me show you the picture I drew. Doesn't it look a lot like our house now?" the boy asked Rose, showing her the picture. Rose felt a little uncomfortable that she was now the owner of the house. In the evening, Tim volunteered to walk her home. They walked slowly, as if they both wanted to be near each other as long as possible. Rose asked him about his work, about his son's studies, about Sean's health. Tim, on the other hand, didn't ask Rose about anything, but answered her questions briefly, as if he wanted to talk about something more important. "I've heard from my grandfather about your failed marriage. Do you still love him, or are you indifferent to him? Don't answer without thinking. I want to know if you still have any feelings for your ex-husband," Tim asked, very unexpectedly, to Rose. "Why do you want to know? I have no warm feelings for the man, only contempt and pity. He looks like a beaten dog now, and he has to deal with his father a lot in his work. But he has to put up with it. He will have to pay his debt for 50 years. And you know, if he's allowed back in power, he'll do the same thing, but he'll be much more careful and cunning. So why do you want to know how I feel?" Tim didn't answer anything. He simply pulled the woman to him and sank his lips into hers as greedily as if his life depended on it. Rose didn't resist. She was so pleased with the smell of his cheap cologne, his slight unshavenness, and the courage that had driven him to this somewhat rash act. Afterward, they walked in silence to Rose's house. He took her hands before the door and kissed them for a long time. "I think you see why it was important for me to know. Good night." He left quickly and without turning around, and Rose stood at the gate for a long time, not realizing what was happening. Inside, she was on fire from his kiss, and she felt wanted, loved, and the only one. Rose and Tim didn't see each other often. He worked for a local farmer from morning till night, and in the evenings he took care of his son. On weekends, he rebuilt his house and only came to her house a couple times a week to meet and spend some time with her. The man didn't ask to come in, wasn't intrusive in his desires. He simply loved, even idolized the object of his love, and did not dare to stoop to carnal pleasures, so as not to offend her dignity. "Daughter, why don't you stop fooling around with a man? Either get rid of him or get married." "I need grandchildren," joked Steve. Once again came to visit his daughter. "Well, from whom do you get such knowledge? Or did you put a hidden camera on the house?" Rose parried, setting the table. "I don't need those cameras. I realized it at my grandfather's birthday party, so I left quickly. Then one night I was driving by and you two were making out by the lake. No, I wasn't peeking. I was in the woods for a while and I didn't get home until an hour after you got home. Yes, I'm an old schemer. Yes, I missed your first choice. I didn't recognize the rascal, but I'm sure of this one. And the man's hands are really good. Grandpa was right." Rose and Tim dated for about 6 months. The whole neighborhood knew about their relationship, but they still did not show their feelings in public, as if it was something very expensive that others should not see. The wedding was modest, a purely family affair. Apart from the family, the only other invitees were Lizzie. She was the witness. And today they go together to the counseling center to find out the sex of their future baby. Steve is happy. He didn't even go to work. He waits for them at the hospital and worries. It would be good to have a boy, a helper for grandfather. And a girl is also good. Girls are loyal, affectionate. I wish there were twins.